I remember I was invited out to eat. It was a lunch meeting with another pastor. And the place that the pastor invited me to come have lunch was a very expensive place. Now, I wanted to meet this pastor, but I'm going to be honest with you, it wasn't quite Friday yet. And so that direct deposit didn't quite hit my checking account like it normally does on routine. But he wanted to meet with me, and he chose one of the most expensive places he could think of. And I didn't want to be rude and say, well, if we could push this thing back to Friday-ish, Saturday-ish, I would love to come. And so I just went. I said, sure thing. I responded to his message. Hey, let's meet. I'm looking forward to it. So I meet this pastor for this lunch meeting, and everything's going wonderful. He tells me to order whatever I want, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. But I'm flipping through the menu, and I find something that looks good, and I place my order. He places his order. We get our drinks, and we're talking, we're sharing. He's pouring some things into me and sharing some things with me that God told him to share with me. And my whole life is getting blessed. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about this check that's going to come. Like, I receive every word you are giving me right now, but you ain't said nothing about a release of no money. And so I know this check about to come. And so I'm just looking around. I'm like, Lord, I'm going to have to wash some dishes. Or the Lord himself, like Abraham, going to have to provide himself a ram. Because I don't know what's about to happen when this check comes. And the waitress comes, and she asks a very interesting question. She looks at the both of us, and she says, will this be one check or two? Everything in me wanted to scream one, but that wasn't my place. That was not my place to do. And so I'm sitting there with this one in my spirit, and clearly the Holy Spirit dropped it in his spirit too, because he said one check. I said, praise the Lord. Now, I was hoping that he meant one check handed to me, but we would see when she came back with it. And so she comes back with the one check, and she lays it on the table, and I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and as the sweat is dripping down my cheek, he grabs the check, and I said, thank you, Jesus. That day, I learned him as Yahweh. No, clearly I knew him as Jehovah Jireh way before then. But I say that to make a point. As we look at today's text, we notice Abraham is in a pretty similar situation. God has told him to meet him somewhere that's very expensive. Because the place that he asked Abraham to meet him is a place that's going to cost him the very thing he has been praying all this time about. See, for those of you who don't know the backstory of Abraham, Abraham's an old man by this time. Abraham is getting up there in age. In fact, Abraham has passed that grace number of 70 that we all expect, and everything else is just kind of overflow. Abraham got his and then some. And then God comes up with this strange idea as Abraham is retiring, getting to his days of rest and relaxation. God says, you know what? Your wife's going to get pregnant and y'all going to have a baby. And Abraham's like, whoa, wait a minute, that's cool. I planned on just, passing this thing along through some other folks. We good over here. But God says, no. As numerous as the sand is, as numerous as the stars are, that's how many descendants are going to come from you. Now, this old man has been given this burden that he's going to have to raise up not just a baby, but a nation. In fact, his wife gets the news and she busts out laughing because she could not believe. She knows that she's barren. She knows that her womb already was having issues, but now she's at an age where those personal summers start to hit and things of that nature. She's not thinking about a baby. In fact, she laughs, and the irony of it is that she finally does have this baby, and she names him Isaac, which means laughter. God has an amazing sense of humor. After all of this, they finally produce Isaac. And God comes to this old man with this strange request. He says, listen, I want you to meet me for lunch. And Abraham is thinking to himself, well, God, what's for lunch? And he says, your son. I want you to put your son on the altar. I want you to cut him, and I want you to light him on fire. See, the Bible doesn't go into that sort of detail, but if you go to Leviticus, you know exactly what's about to happen here, and ain't nothing pretty about it. But Abraham gets this news, and he's going, and he gets there. And when it comes time to do what God has called him to do, when it comes time for the bill to be paid, God says, one check. This one is on me. If I were to give today's sermon a title, I think it would be just that. One check. Somebody say one check.
One check.
One check. Again, we're going through the names of God. We're going through the names of God. We've looked at, so far, Elroy. We looked at Elroy, the God who sees me. And now I kind of want to transition to one that we're all familiar with, but I don't think we understand the depth of what it means when we say Jehovah Jireh, or if you want to be fancy and go to the Hebrew, Yahweh Yahweh. I want to share with you today the benefits of knowing God as provider. Someone say, He's my provider. He's my provider. The benefits of knowing God as provider. The first thing, or the first lesson I believe we learned here, praise the Lord. The first thing we learned through this text about God being a provider is that when you know Him as provider, you don't wait to move. I don't know what is happening today. You don't wait to move. We bless God for the silence button in Jesus' name. You don't wait to move. Somebody say, I'm not waiting to move.
I'm not waiting to move.
Now, the reason you aren't happy about that is because you haven't looked at the text. Verse 1 says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. He responded, here I am. He says, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Now, this is the same Mount Moriah where Moses would be taken to look into the promised land that he would not go into. This is really would go on to become a very sad place, Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. And so the Bible says Abraham got up early in the morning. Now, I want you to think about what's actually happening here. Because, again, our first lesson that we learned here is that when you know Him as provider, you don't wait to move. Abraham has just been asked. I need to make this graphic, so I apologize right now. But the text doesn't quite do it justice here. Abraham has just been asked to take his son to a mountain, to tie him up to some wood, to slit his throat, because that's what they would do to the animal. To slit his throat, to let him bleed out, to sprinkle that blood on this altar, and then light him on fire. And the Bible says that Abraham gets up early in the morning to do this. I don't think it's sinking in. God has just asked Abraham to take the one thing he has been waiting for God to give him. Take it up a mountain, tie it up to some wood, slit the throat of it, sprinkle the blood on the altar, and then light it on fire in Jesus' name. And Abraham's response to this is, I'm going to set my alarm clock early in the morning, and I'm going to get up and do what God asked me to do. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm going to put this into a perspective that men can probably get with me on. Ladies, don't be offended, but the truth hurts sometimes. So there are times when me and my wife go out to eat, or maybe I'm just picking up something on my way home, and I have my mouth set for something. And I say, honey, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to get this, because I really got a taste for it. It don't happen often, but every so often, I get a taste for something specific. And so we go, and like every good husband and boyfriend, I look to her, and I say, honey, would you like something? And my wife's response is, nah, honey, I'm good. I say, okay. I check again, are you sure? And she says, yes, I'm positive. I'm good. You go ahead, I'm okay. I say, all right. I place my order. I get my food. It smells amazing. I can't wait to get home to enjoy it. So I'm breaking the speed limit to get home because I can't wait to I've been waiting on this thing for however long I've been waiting on it. I cannot wait to get home because this is all I want right now. In some cases, I waited 8 hours. I waited through my whole shift to get it. I get home. I get comfortable. Turn on something good on TV. Keep my shoes off. Start unwrapping my food. And my wife does something strange. She says, honey, can I have some? Wait a minute. You're asking me for something I've been waiting for a long time. You're asking me for something I want. And here's the thing. If you wanted something, I gave you the opportunity. Why would you ask me for the one thing I want? Now, women, I don't know why y'all do this. Maybe we can have a meeting after church today, and y'all can enlighten me on the concept of not ordering something when the opportunity is given and then eating off of the poor man's plate. I don't know. But that's what Abraham is facing right now. It is the equivalent of waiting his whole life for that one meal, asking God, you good? God saying, I'm good. Getting to that place, and God saying, can I get a fry? He's been waiting his whole life for this thing. And now he's asked to give the very thing he's been waiting for all this time away. Has God ever asked you for something you didn't want to give him? Maybe that's just my testimony. I don't know what your life has been, but every so often, God has this strange habit of asking me for things that really I had no plan on giving him. That God asked me to do things that I did not put on my calendar. That God asked me to go places that I really have no interest in going. But here's the difference. Because Abraham knows him as a provider. Abraham has made up his mind that whatever it is that God is asking me to do, he's capable of ensuring I don't leave empty-handed. And I don't know about you, but this has shifted my perspective and perception of the hard things that God asked me to do. That whenever God is asking me to do something difficult, whenever God is asking me to go somewhere far, whenever God is asking me to pay more than I want to pay, whenever God is asking me to stay somewhere longer than I want to be, I've come to the conclusion that he's my provider. And because he's my provider, I'm never going to leave a situation empty-handed. Abraham understands that the same God, watch this, who put a living baby in his wife's dead womb, can resurrect the dead baby he offers to him. He knows God in a way that most of us say, but we really don't live it. Which brings me to my next thought. Abraham, he gets up early in the morning. Why is he so motivated to get this thing done? First thought, when you know God as a provider, you don't move with hesitation. You move with expectation. I'm going to say that again. When you know God as provider, you don't move with hesitation. You move with expectation. See, again, because he knows that God is his provider, he does not hesitate. He does not procrastinate. He gets up early to get it done. Watch this. Because Abraham understands the sooner I get to it, the sooner he'll bring me through it. And when you know him as a provider, that becomes your mindset. That when God sends you into a hard place, you don't put that thing off. You get up early in the morning. You make it the first thing on your to-do list. Why? Because the sooner I get to it, the sooner he'll see me through it. And I don't know if there's anybody here today that can testify God has never led me to something that he's never led me through. And this is why no matter what he tells me to do, I don't put it off till tomorrow. But no, I'm going to move on it now. Why? Because I know him as a provider. See if I can make this plain. If I go through my phone, I pretty much have two groups of people. I have my expectation group and I have my hesitation group. You have them, you just don't call them that. I'm going to enlighten you today. Here's the difference. My expectation group are the people that I know if I need something, I can call them because they're going to be there. That's my expectation group. Those are people that I know if I call them, unless they are on the other side of the planet, they're going to be there. And in some cases, thanks to technology, even if they are on the other side of the planet, they're going to be there. That's my expectation group. But then there's another group in my phone, the hesitation group. These are the people I call when every last one of my expectation people are at a funeral, are working the grave shift. There's just no way possible anyone in my expectation group can make it. That's when I call my hesitation group. group. I call them my hesitation group because I always hesitate. I expect to be disappointed by this group. There is never a time I call them with a need that they needed. There's no expectation there. Watch this, because their track record with me is bad. But my expectation group has such a phenomenal track record with me that there's a confidence when I call them. That when I call this person, I expect nothing less than the situation to be handled. I expect nothing less than the situation to be taken care of. They have such a good track record with me of coming through that I call them with expectation. And it's that level of expectation that God is asking us to have in him. When we discover him as provider, we can have this level of confidence that the same God who brought me through this will be the same God to bring me through that. And this is what blows my mind sometimes, that we get in church and we sing songs about Jehovah Jireh, but the problem is we put him in the hesitation group instead of the expectation group. We go down a long list of folks, a long list of family members, a long list of church folk, a long list of co-workers, and then when we finally get disappointed by all of them, we say, God, it's me standing in the need of prayer.
Come on, Pastor Mike.
The first thing we learn from Abraham is that God should not be my last resort. He should be my first resolution. And watch this. If God can't do it, really ain't no need to call nobody else. Abraham models what this faith walk looks like. That God, I don't want to do it, but you've been too good to me back here for me to start tripping now. And so before I do anything, I'm going to do what you're asking me to do. God, it's painful, but I'm going to do it. God, it hurts, but I'm going to do it. God, it's costing a little more than I want to give, but I'm going to do it. God, it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it. How many of us have that testimony that no matter where God tells us to go, no matter what God tells us to say, no matter how God tells us to do it, we won't hesitate. We won't procrastinate. We won't say, God, I'll do it next week, but we'll say, God, send me, I'll go. And this is why we must know him as provider. Because when you know him as provider, you don't move with hesitation. You move with expectation. Watch this. I don't mind going to the hard places because I know the more difficult it is, the more mountains God's going to have to move to get his glory. And so I don't go expecting to be hurt. I don't go expecting to be disappointed. I don't go expecting to be let down. But watch this. I go expecting to have my mind blown by an amazing God. I go with an expectation that God is going to do something I did not imagine. I go with the expectation that, watch this, my heart may be broken going into it, but my heart will be mended coming out of it. I go into it with the mindset, this may hurt going in, but I'm going to be healed coming out. It's important to know him as provider because it allows me to go into difficult situations, not with hesitation, but expectation. I know you know him as Jehovah Jireh by how you respond to your traumatic situations. I know that you know him as Jehovah Jireh by what comes out of your mouth when a difficulty arises. And for Abraham, it's, God, I don't want to do it. God, I don't know what you're doing here. God, I don't understand why you're asking me for this now. But God, because it's you, I expect nothing less than a miracle when I get there. When you know him as provider, you don't wait to move. Not only that, but when you know him as provider, you welcome people into your hard moments. We ain't going to like this one. When you know him as provider, you welcome people into your hard moments. Now, some of y'all saying, I don't like folks knowing all my business. They don't need to know what's going on in my life. But Abraham shows us some different behavior. I love how Abraham responds to his situation because instead of running away from people, he welcomes people into this hard moment in his life. Verse 3, he saddled his donkey, took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to the place God had told him about. Again, let's put this into perspective. God has just told this man, go to a mountain that I'll show you when you get there. When you get there, tie your son up to some wood, slit his throat, sprinkle his blood all over the altar, and light him on fire in my name. Now, something like this, I don't want nobody to know about. First of all, I'm scared I'm going to jail for killing my child. It's a tough situation. I'm going to explain this when I get back home. But Abraham does something weird. Instead of pushing people away from this dark moment, he brings along two other people. See, the only requirement for what God told him to do was you and your son. The wood, the fire, that's it. But Abraham brings two other people with him. Now, I'm one who, when I read the Bible, I like to ask questions. I like to talk to the text. And so I'm looking at this, and I'm like, Abraham, this don't make sense. Why are you bringing two additional people? God did not tell you to bring anybody. God told you, take your son, take your rope, take your wood, light some fire, and make this thing happen. God never tells you to bring anybody. Why are you bringing people with you? Which brings me to my next thought. When you know God as a provider, you don't worry about critics. You welcome them as witnesses. I'm going to say that again. When you know God as a provider, you don't worry about critics. You welcome them as witnesses. See, here's what messes most of us up. And this is why I know we don't really know him as Yahweh Jireh. See, when we find ourselves in these difficult moments, we stop answering people's phone calls. When we find ourselves in these difficult moments, we stop showing up at church. When we find ourselves in these difficult moments, we stop posting stuff on Facebook and Instagram because we don't want people to know what's going on in our lives. We like to say this: what goes on in this house stays in this house. But Abraham does not subscribe to this philosophy. Abraham is not worried about what people are going to say about his situation. He's not worried about what people are going to post on social media. He's not worried about what folks are going to float at the water cooler at the office. He's not worried about the sort of gossip that's going to spread through the church in regards to what he's going through. No, Abraham says, listen, I'm welcoming you into this dark place. I'm going to tell you what's going on in my life. I'm going to share with you this dark place I found myself in. And listen, you might come in as a critic, but I'm so confident in my God that you come in one way, you're going to leave out another. You might have come in here trying to be nosy, but you're going to leave out of here shaking your head. You might have come in here looking for something to talk about, but God knows you're going to leave with something to talk about, but it won't be what you thought it would be. I don't worry about critics. I welcome them as witnesses. Yes. Harry Houdini is known as a master escape artist. And he's known as a master escape artist because he had this habit of putting himself in difficult situations, inviting an audience to watch it, and then getting out of it. Now, that's a strange behavior. I want you to think about that. He would invite a whole group of people to come watch him get put in a situation that really he shouldn't be able to get out of. But he was so confident in his ability to get out of it that he would welcome them to come watch him get locked up in chains. He would invite them to come watch him get wrapped up in all these tarps. He would welcome them to come watch him get locked in this crate with the lock on the outside so that he can't pick it. He would invite people in to watch him get put into these difficult situations because he was so confident in his ability that he didn't care who came doubting. He didn't care who came shaking their head. He didn't care who came talking negative. He didn't care who came to just spectate. But he was so confident in his ability to get out of any situation that he said, listen, all who are willing to see, come see, I will get out of this. This is the level of confidence that Yahweh Jireh is requiring of us, that we be so confident in his ability to get us out of anything, that we continue to answer our phones when it's difficult, that we continue to go to work when it's hard, that we continue to come to church and lift up our hands when everything at home tells us not to, that we continue to go forward in life, not caring what people may say, but welcoming these critics to leave out of here as witnesses. And the amazing thing about Harry Houdini is every show he invited people to, he got out. Yes. I don't know who I'm encouraging this morning, but you've been pushing people away, and God is saying, listen, don't move my audience out of this. I need you to have the sort of confidence in me that, again, if I led you to it, I'm going to lead you through it. That there is nothing too hard for my God. That there is no diagnosis my God can't heal me from. That there is no heartbreak that my God can't bring me out of. That there is no church hurt that God can't restore my faith in the place of worship. That there is nothing thing that can happen in my life that my God cannot bring me out of. The psalmist said it this way: I've been young, I've been old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but God delivers them out of not some. God delivers them out of not a couple. God delivers them not out of a few, but God delivers them out of them all.
Yes. Thank you, Lord.
When you know him as provider, you welcome people into these hard moments.
Yes.
See, even if I share, and I'm to the place where I'm mature beyond that, I don't worry about sharing things with the wrong people. I don't. Because I've now adapted this mentality. Your motives may not have been good in asking me, but God's motive, can I quote Joseph? You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. See, you meant it so you can have something to share, but God meant it so he can show you who he really is. So I don't worry about sharing things with the wrong people. Listen, this is my situation. It just is what it is. Now, what you choose to do with it is on you, but what my God is going to do with it is going to blow your mind. When you know him as Jehovah Jireh, when you know him as a provider, you welcome people into your hard moments. Not only do you not wait to move, not only do you welcome people into your hard moments, but when you know him as provider, and I said this earlier this morning, you worship different. Yeah. See, you haven't really worshiped until you know him as Yahweh Jireh. When you know him as Jehovah Jireh, your worship goes to a whole nother place. What do I mean? Verse 4 says, on the third day, Abraham looked up, and he saw the place in the distance. Then Abraham said to his young son, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship, then we'll come back to you. I always get excited when I read this part. I think the saints just miss it. But listen to this conversation. God has just asked him to take your son up a mountain, to tie him to some wood, to slit his throat, to sprinkle the blood on the altar, to light him on fire in my name. And this is what he tells the people that he brought with him. Y'all stay here. Me and my son are going to worship, and we'll be back. I need y'all not to miss that. He says, listen, me and my son are going up this mountain. God told me to tie him to the wood, to slit his throat, to sprinkle the blood on the altar, to light him on fire in his name, but we're going to be back. We're going to worship. Now, I know they like, I don't know what kind of worship that is. And I sure don't know how both y'all coming back. If both y'all coming back, y'all ain't coming back the same. You might. He coming back in the bag. This don't look good. He says, we're going to worship, and we'll be back. Now, again, I'm one who likes to ask questions. I'm like, well, why is this murder? Why is he calling this worship? Like, the law that God gives, the setup that God gives to his people for worship, it involves animals. It does not require people. And so this is a little different from what God is normally requiring of his people. When he asks for a burnt offering, in fact, the first offering in the Bible takes place in Genesis chapter 3 at the fall of man. God kills an animal to redeem Adam and Eve. He does not kill their son. He does not kill a human. He uses substitutionary premise where he replaces the animal as a sacrifice for the person. And so this is a little different. I'm like, God, this isn't the worship that they're used to. What is this new worship that you're doing? And he enlightened me. Worship is not a slow song. Worship is a significant sacrifice. Worship is not a slow song. Worship is a significant sacrifice. I think the problem is when we come here on Sunday and I say, let's worship God, you all get in the mindset of, oh, we're going to sing a slow song, we're going to lift our hands, and we're going to sway from side to side for a few minutes because that's the worship we're used to. But the problem is the Apostle Paul tells us that we don't worship like that anymore. That we present our bodies a living sacrifice unto God, which is our reasonable service. Here's the difference. See, anybody can sing, but just because you're singing a slow song don't mean you worship. Here's the difference. It's, again, God is spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. This is the difference. I can sing all day, and as the prophet says, I'm honoring God with my lips, but my heart is far from him. Here's the difference between what Shakrita does, per se, and what some other folks may do. Shakrita gets up here, and she makes a decision. Watch this. This is worship. This is the difference. That I'm going to sacrifice air I could be using to breathe to sing praises to my God. And that's the difference. That's the difference. See, the difference is I'm not just doing this and going through the motions. But no, God, I'm giving you my breath. This breath that I can be using to preserve my life, I'm using to praise your glory. I'm giving you my air. I'm not just clapping my hands just to be clapping my hands. What I'm doing is, God, I could be using these hands to do something else. But there's nothing else I'd rather do with these hands than give you a standing ovation because you've been performing amazing things in my life. I'm not just lifting my hands and holding them up until they hurt because it's a good exercise and I can work off this little flab underneath. But no, God, I'm burning. Again, you burn it. I'm burning this flesh. I'm going to keep these hands up until I'm tired. I'm going to keep these hands up even after the pastor has finished preaching. I'm going to keep these hands up. Why? Because I'm presenting it as a burnt offering. I'm sacrificing my comfort. I'm sacrificing my peace. I'm sacrificing my time. I'm sacrificing. I'm giving it to you, and there's nothing else I'd rather give it to.
Hallelujah.
How do I know you know Jehovah Jireh?
Jesus.
Because worship ain't just a slow song.
Oh, my God.
See, look at what Abraham is calling worship. First of all, Abraham ain't at church. Abraham, this is like a Friday morning. This is not a solemn assembly that Abraham does not wait for a moment to worship. Watch this. He lives a life of worship. He understands that worship, it goes hand in hand with sacrifice. That if your worship don't cost you nothing, it ain't worship. I want you to ask yourself that question. How much does my worship cost me? And if you've never considered that question, might I argue you have not experienced worship? Your worship should cost you something. And watch this. I would argue from Abraham's example, really your worship should cost you everything. Because this thing that God is asking of him is the one thing he's always wanted. And this is why Jesus says, where your treasure is, your heart will be. I know if you really love me when you're willing to give me what you love. It cost him something. It cost him something. This worship went beyond just going through the motions. This worship cost him everything. This worship cost him his sleep because he got up early. This worship cost him his time because he had to travel to a place. In fact, the Bible says it takes him 3 days to get where God has called him to go. And then when he gets there, he has to carry all this heavy stuff up a mountain. And then when he gets it up the mountain, he has to look at his son in the eye, the one son he's been praying for all this time, and raise a knife to him and prepare to cut this son and to burn him. This is what it's costing him. I can only imagine the mental torment. God, I've been waiting my whole life for this thing, and you're telling me to walk away from this thing? God, I've been waiting my whole life to be married, and now I find myself in a marriage that's rocky. God, I've been waiting my whole life to rise in my career, and now I get here. You're going to let somebody come in that I trained to get the position that I've been working my whole life to get? God, I've been waiting my whole life to get a little money. I grew up poor, and now I'm looking at bankruptcy. God, what in the world are you doing? And might I argue that we need to start changing what we call worship? Because when I get that call from the doctor that they found a lump, when I put it on my calendar, it should be worship at the hospital. When the bank calls me and says, we going to foreclose on your home and we need to have a meeting, I need to put that on my calendar as worship at the bank. When my boss calls me in and says, we've been looking at your numbers and we need to have a conversation, I need to put that on my calendar as worship in my boss's office. Because I'm confident that no matter what happens in that meeting, my God is still worthy. And I'm not going in here to fight. I'm not going in here to argue, but I'm going in here with the expectation that whatever God makes happen here, He's going to get some glory out of it. You worship different. When you know him as provider, you worship different. Not only that, number 4, when you know him as provider, Jehovah Jireh, you walk by faith. Now, some of you saying, Pastor Mike, we Christians. That makes sense. We used to that. We walk by faith, not by sight. Now, I'm scared to say that for many of us that walk by faith, not by sight, has just become a cliche. It's not really what we do. We say we walk by faith, not by sight, but we're constantly looking for evidence all around us. But when you know him as Jehovah Jireh, those become more than just words on a page. They literally begin to navigate everything that you do. Verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked together. Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham. He talked to his father Abraham and said, my father. And he replied, here I am, my son. Isaac said, the fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham's answer always blesses me. He says, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Now I need you to, again, recognize what's going on here. Abraham is on his way up a mountain to kill his son. And his son has gotten smart. He started piecing stuff together. Like most of us probably would have figured it out before we got to the mountain. But he clearly had faith in his father. He said, all right, Pop, we almost at the top of this mountain. And listen, I see the wood. And you holding the fire. I got the rope. I don't see a lamb. And he looks to his son. He says, son, God will provide himself a lamb. Abraham don't see no lamb. But Abraham is so confident in his God that if I get all the way up to this mountain, and if I bind my son, even if I cut my son, even if I light my son on fire, I'm not leaving this mountain without my son. I don't know what God is going to do. I don't know how God's going to do it. But by the time I finish doing worship, is what he called it, by the time I finish worshiping, something is going to be different. And might I argue maybe that's the reason our worship experiences should be longer? That our expectation shouldn't just be, I'm coming to get a word, but I'm coming to worship. Because if we follow his example, that while I'm worshiping, God is working. And by the time I finish worshiping, God will work something out at home that I couldn't figure out before I left. That by the time I finish worshiping, God will work something out in the office that I was racking my brain on Friday, dreading going in Monday. By the time I finish worshiping, that God is going to do something in my spouse that I've been trying to communicate all this time. That by the time I finish worshiping, that God's going to do something in that hospital of my loved one that's going to bring them out of that hospital bed. By the time I finish worshiping, ain't nobody worshiping. By the time I finish worshiping, that God is going to bring that family member out of the jail. They locked them away with no evidence, but something is going to surface that they overlooked in the case. By the time I finish worshiping, God is going to be working something out for my good, because the Bible lets us know he works all things together for the good of them that love him and are called according to his purpose. How do I know I'm called according to his purpose? Because I'm his people, called by his name. And when I humble myself and pray, seek his face, turn from my wicked ways, and throw up some worship, not just petitions, but I'm pouring onto my God how amazing he is. He don't need to hear it from me, but I just want to remind him that his track record with me is good, and I don't care what I see or don't see in my life. I don't care who comes or who goes. I don't care what opportunities open or close. I don't care who goes with me or who won't. I don't care what I see, because I know what I've experienced. And the same God that put a living baby in my wife's dead womb, and I can name him Laughter after she laughed at his possibility, is the same God that's going to make sure I come back down this mountain with my son. Every so often, people ask me, Pastor Mike, how did you become the pastor of One Life Christian Community Center? And reflecting on that, I've come to the following conclusion. And maybe Bishop Riddick can tell me different, but I don't believe I became the pastor of this church because I'm the best preacher. Don't get me wrong, I do all right. But I don't believe it was my preaching ability that got me to be the pastor of this church. I don't think it's because I could raise the most money. I'm really not a fundraising pastor. It's just not my thing. I don't think it was these temporal things. The only thing I can think of as it relates to why I might be in this position is I take serving very serious. I literally take serving. There is nothing that Bishop Riddick has ever asked me to do that I did not do. And here's the thing. It did not always start off that way. See, Bishop would ask me to do something minuscule, and I would do it. But I would do that minuscule thing on such a great level that he then would start to ask me to do other things. And Bishop got so bold one day. This is how confident and how much faith he started to put in me. I'll never forget, I was on my way to church, and I was coming over the Gilmerton Bridge. Never forget this. On my way to church, can't wait for church, looking for a word, excited to get there. I think it might have been Mid-Communion Sunday. I'm excited, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to have some church. I'm halfway over the bridge, and I receive a phone call from Bishop. Bishop Riggs says, hey son, I received a call from another bishop. I got to help him out this morning. I'm on my way here. Can you preach this morning? I paused, started thinking to myself, sure, yeah. All right, Bishop, you go ahead. I can't tell you turn around now. You're halfway there. I got it. I get to the church. I go to a little private place. We had a little satellite office outside the church building. And I sit there and I say, God, give me a word. Give me a word for these people. And sure enough, he took me back to something I had been studying earlier that week. And I preached it. And I'll never forget it. Preached that sermon. There was a young lady in the congregation, first time coming to the church. She comes to me after church and says, this morning I was contemplating suicide, either killing myself or accepting the invitation to come to this church today. And you spoke to everything that I was ready to kill myself over this morning. That's not the part that I want you to be blessed by. Here's the part I want you to be blessed by. Bishop did not see me preparing any sermons. In fact, Bishop didn't know that I had even read my Bible that week. I could have just taken my duties light. Bishop, you got to give me 2 weeks notice before you put me up to preach. But he had developed such a confidence in me that anything he asked me to do, no matter how soon, how far out, he knew I would move mountains to make it happen. That's the level of faith that God wants us to have in him. That God, I don't see what you're doing, but I know you're doing something. God, I don't know how you're going to work this out, but I know you're going to work it out. God, I don't know how you're going to heal me from this diagnosis, but I know you're a healer. See, God wants us to get to a place where who he is not predicated on what we see. And this is what it means to walk by faith, not by sight. Yes. That when I call God, I don't have to see anything to expect an answer. That when I call out to God, even if things look the total opposite of what I'm asking him to do, that he's a God who will move heaven and earth to make it happen. Why? Because I'm his child. When you know him as Yahweh, Yahweh, walking by faith isn't just something you say. Walking by faith is at this Abraham level. That God, no matter what you ask me for, no matter what you tell me to do, no matter what you tell me to say, I don't care what it looks like. Even if I can't see it, I trust you. I'm reminded of a man by the name of Job, whose testimony became, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Even when life is telling me that I should have no trust for God, even when life is telling me that my God is not here, even when life is telling me that my God ain't gonna come through, I'm reminded of two folks late in the midnight hour in chains and shackles behind a bolted door. Paul and Silas had just been whooped for preaching the gospel, and God called them to preach the gospel. Now everything in life told them, you need to start preaching the gospel, because every time you preach the gospel, you get beat and you get thrown in chains. But I love their response to their situation. The Bible says in the midnight hour, and this was a prison that didn't have light at that time. They had to light a fire and go to this deep, dark place to get them out. Late in the midnight hour, watch this, they can't see nothing, but they start worshiping. And as they begin to worship, the Bible says that the earth begins to quake. They don't see what's going on. They're just worshiping their God. And the earth begins to quake. And the Bible says that the door without a key opens. And the Bible says that the shackles on their hands drop off. No one came and unlocked them. But their worship, as they worship, God began to work. I'm trying to help somebody. That if you would begin to worship in the worst of things, if you would begin to worship when you don't see a way out, if you begin to worship when you can't think a way out, if you begin to worship when you can't phone a friend, if you begin to worship even though you can't see it, God will begin to work it out. When you know him as a provider, you walk by faith. I'm going to give you one more and we're going home. When you know him as a provider, you write your story different. We're going home. When you know him as a provider, you write your story different. What do I mean? But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He replied, here I am. Then he said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know. That's interesting to me. That's because we say that God is omniscient, that he knows everything. But we read here in the text, he says, now I know. Again, he knows everything, but here he says, now I know. Which suggests to me that before this happened, he didn't know. Now, does that mean that God is not omniscient, that he doesn't know everything? No. No. And I've given this example a few times. God is like a master chess player. He knows every possible move on the board. And so he knows every possible outcome of every move that you make. But you still have the free will to make the move. And so I don't know the move you're going to make till you move it, but I know every move you can make. And I've already prepared for every move you're going to make. He says, now I know. I knew what was possible for you to do. But now I know that you're someone who's going to do what I thought you would do. I still know all things, but I still give you that freedom to prove me wrong. Isn't that amazing? That we serve a God who not only knows everything, but can do everything. He can force me to do whatever he wants me to do, but he still gives me the freedom to disappoint him. Which is why I live my life to make sure I don't disappoint him. Because for someone that powerful to give me that much freedom, do you really want to make that person mad anyway? Just my 2 cents. But nevertheless, he says, now I know that you fear me, since you have not withheld your only son from me. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide. So today it is said it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. First thing I need you to notice before I close this thing out. Remember Abraham's words. He says, son, the Lord will provide himself a lamb. But when he gets to this moment, the Lord provides a ram. Don't miss that. He says, son, the Lord will provide himself a lamb. But when he gets to this moment, the Lord has provided a ram. And he'll do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask or think. I love that. We don't serve a God who meets our expectation. He exceeds our expectation. And this is why I don't put my trust in man. Because man can either not meet my expectation or meet my expectation. And every so often someone will exceed my expectation. But God has a habit of not meeting my expectation. And here's the crazy part. Even when he doesn't meet my expectation, it's not because he can't do it. It's because I was aiming too low. And so he doesn't meet my expectation. He exceeds my expectation because that's just the sort of God we serve. Yes. Why is this important? Because a ram can also be used as a sin offering. So he wasn't just resolving his physical situation. He was resolving his spiritual situation. We serve a holistic God. That even when he does a thing in the natural, he's still working things out in the background. When he's taking care of something in the realm we can see, he's also solving an issue in the realm that we cannot see. He says, listen, God will provide himself a lamb, but when he gets there, God has provided a ram. Yeah. And it's out of that place, as he's gone through the motions, as he's done everything that he's about to do, he literally has the knife up in the air, and he's about to kill his son. And the angel of the Lord says, Abraham, Abraham, chill out. Chill out. Now we know. Now I know. You really do fear God. That there is nothing you will withhold from me. And what's interesting is that when you look at this, there is such a parallel to the passion of Christ. Yeah. that everything about this moment says Jesus. Everything. You missed it. Can I help you? Notice, Isaac has to carry the wood he's going to be laid on. And the Bible lets us know that Jesus had to carry his own cross.
Yes. Oh,
Watch this. Watch this. He gets there, and he's bound to the wood. And we know they put nails in his hand and in his feet and bound him to the wood. Look at the ram. It's caught in the thicket. In other words, there were thorns around the ram's head. Maybe Abraham knew something we didn't know. Maybe those two witnesses made for the 2 or 3 necessary to gather in his name that he might be there. See, Jesus says something interesting when the Sadducees and Pharisees are coming at him, and he's, y'all ain't really see the Abraham. They like, how you don't know Abraham? He's like, no, Abraham actually smiled when he saw me. Miss it, don't miss it, don't miss it, don't miss it. Abraham saw Jesus in his son. Because as he was giving up his only begotten son, he was setting the blueprint for what God would do over 2,000 years ago. Maybe this was God's inspiration for how he was going to spare all of us in the future. Maybe this was the framework. And this is why I'm grateful for Abraham. Because Abraham began to set in motion not just the deliverance of his own son, but his willingness to give up his son showed God that there was someone in the world who was willing to do for him what he was preparing to do for the world. And if we'll be honest, most of us couldn't be Abraham because we love our babies way too much. But here's what made Abraham significant. He loved his child enough to where if God wanted him, I'm willing to give him. No matter how painful it may be to me, I love him so much that I'm willing to give him to you. Why? Because I love you even more. This is why Jesus said, if you love mother or father more than me, you are not worthy of me. Just an analysis. But here's the point I want you to focus on. We're going home. Abraham names the place Yahweh Jireh, Jehovah Jireh. Now, the reason I keep reiterating Yahweh Jireh is there are no J's in Hebrew. It's when we translate it into the English that we put a J, because it sounds a little better. But there are no J's in the Hebrew language, and so it would be Yahweh Jireh in the original language. But I need you to notice, he does not call God Yahweh Jireh. Look at the text. It says he names the place Yahweh Jireh. So watch this. I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial. Maybe we were never to pray to Yahweh Jireh. Maybe we were to declare places Yahweh Jireh. Maybe there are some things in our life and some places in our life that we need to go rename. See, here's the difference. If Abraham is my example, then my response to trouble should not be, Yahweh Jireh, save me. My response to trouble should be, and this place will be Yahweh Jireh. And this child will be Yahweh Jireh. And this bank account will be Yahweh Jireh. And this purse or wallet will be Yahweh Jireh. And this church will be Yahweh Jireh. And this car will be Yahweh Jireh. And this spouse will be Yahweh Jireh. And this congregation will be Yahweh Jireh. And this community will be Yahweh Jireh. And this White House will be Yahweh Jireh. And this court shall be Yahweh Jireh. And that jail cell shall be Yahweh Jireh. And this hospital room shall be Yahweh Jireh. And this medicine shall be Yahweh Jireh. Maybe we were never supposed to pray to Jehovah Jireh. Maybe the point was to memorialize a place where we had a need for God. Because that's the example that we're given here. What do I mean? I love the writing process. In the writing process, there are a couple of different phases that you go through. There's rough draft, there's brainstorming, there's outlining, there's rough draft, there's editing, there's final draft. Or you can do another draft after that, second, third, however many you want. But those are the bases. But finally, you get to your final draft. But you don't just jump to the final draft. And this is the part that I think messes us up. And Abraham understood. He understood this very well. Abraham understood that when God called him to the mountain, that he was not calling him to his final draft. Abraham understood that in this place, I look unto Jesus, the author and finisher of my faith, understanding that my story is not concluding, but that my story is in the editing process. Here's the good thing about the editing process. In the editing process, you can put stuff in and you can take stuff out. And so Abraham looks at, don't miss this, God, I'm on Mount Moriah. That word Moriah, if you look it up, actually means bitterness. God, I'm in this bitter place. But this bitter place won't be my final place. And so he names Moriah Yahweh Yada. He takes out the bitter and inserts the better. Which brings me to my final thought. Stop naming places based on what life did to you, and instead name it for what the Lord has done for you. I'm going to say it again. Stop naming places based on what life did to you, and instead name them for what the Lord has done for you. Abraham does not name that place or keep the name of that place bitterness. This is a bitter place. It's called bitter. And if I'm not careful, I can get bitter because what God is asking me for is more than I wanted to give. Because what God is asking me for is costing me more than I wanted to pay. Because what God is asking me for is breaking my heart. What God is asking me for is keeping me up at night. What God is asking me for is tormenting me in my mind. But I'm not going to stay in this bitter place. I'm going to name it something different. Might I encourage you, those of you who are watching as well, to maybe stop praying to Yahweh Yahweh. Now, don't get me wrong. Keep praying to Yahweh, because Yahweh is his name. That's the name he reveals himself. I am that I am. No, keep praying to Yahweh. But start naming things Yahweh Yahweh. Start naming those hard places Yahweh Yahweh. Start naming those difficult places Yahweh Yahweh. Start naming those uncertain places, Yahweh, Yahweh. Why? Because what it's doing is, I'm telling God, this place will always be a place where you get the glory. Because this place is the place I discovered you as provider. I'm not going to name this place diagnosis just because they diagnosed me with cancer here. No. I'm going to name this place deliverance because this is where I discovered him as a healer. I'm not going to name this place heartbreak just because you broke my heart here. But no, I'm going to name this place with me always because this is where I discovered that when mother and father forsake me, the Lord will take me up. I'm not going to name this place painful even though you hurt me in this place. But I'm going to name this place happy because this is where I discovered the joy of the Lord. I'm not going to name it based on what life did to me. I'm going to name it based on what the Lord did for me. And if nothing else, as you start this week off, I want to challenge you to start renaming some things in your life. Stop naming them what life did to you and start naming them what the Lord has done for you. I know that child is stressing you out, but you lay your hands on him and call him Yahweh Yahweh. I know that family member, you ready to give up on him, but lay your hands on him and say Yahweh Yahweh. I know you don't know how your mortgage is getting paid, but lay your hands on the outside of that house and say Yahweh Yahweh, or that apartment and say Yahweh Yahweh. I know you was expecting that stimulus check and it won't quite as much as you thought it was going to be, but go ahead and pull up your bank account on your phone, lay your hands on the phone and say Yahweh Yahweh. This place, God will always get glory because in this place, I know, and don't miss this, he doesn't name it God provided. He named it the Lord will provide. Which makes it a continual confession. That, watch this, I don't just experience God here one time, but I'm going to always experience God's provision in my life. Some of you are saying, Pastor Mike, I want to believe in Yahweh Yahweh. I want to believe in Jehovah Jireh, but I've been living in lack for so long. Here's why you can be confident in Yahweh Yahweh. I just shared with you that in Genesis, we see a blueprint for what then happens in the New Testament. That from the beginning, God already had you in mind. What blesses me is that in spite of everything God has created, all the splendor, all the magnificence in the world, he's still Elroy. He sees me. Here's something that I didn't share with you. Jehovah Jireh, or Yahweh Yada, the Jireh part, comes from that Hebrew word Yada, which when you look that word up, actually means to see. So it's not just the Lord will provide. It's the Lord will see my need before I need it and provide. God saw in Genesis your need for salvation. God saw in Genesis your need for healing. He saw in Genesis your need for forgiveness. He saw in Genesis your need for happiness. He saw in Genesis your need to be delivered. And he didn't just see your need. He provided in advance for the need that you would have through his son, Jesus Christ.